So my name's Beth Britton. I'm a freelance campaigner, consultant, writer and blogger, and former carer to my father who had vascular dementia for 19 years. So my main concern is to improve the care and support of people who are living with dementia. That's born out of my personal experiences, which I guess we might get onto later on. Really because more people are being diagnosed with dementia, and also we have to bear in mind that dementia doesn't just affect older people, it affects younger people as well. A growing number of under 65s are now being diagnosed with dementia. And there really is a succession of reports and concerns that are raised about the healthcare of people with dementia, particularly in England. So only recently this month, the National Institute of Health Research published a report where they talked very much about how there was a culture of restraint and containment in hospitals, that staff were facing burnout. And despite the fact that there's been a lot of awareness, a lot of talk about making our hospitals dementia friendly, there's been a lot of initiatives around that, around reducing the prescription of antipsychotic medication and educating the workforce, particularly with the investment made through Health Education England, that that hasn't really resulted in the change in practice that I believe is needed. The passion for everything I do, as I've already alluded to, is my dad's life with dementia. So my dad lived with dementia for 19 years. It began when I was around 12 years old. He went 10 years without a diagnosis. That was back in the days before memory clinics and things like that. Obviously because he had vascular dementia, he was having lots of mini strokes, lots of TIAs. And then eventually one day he had a larger stroke. We found him collapsed on the floor at home. He was admitted to hospital, had a bit of sort of hypothermia and things like that. And it was as they rehabilitated him that they then discovered that he had vascular dementia. So they scanned him, they saw the damage to his brain. And it was decided at that point that he would be unable to return home. The doctor said he would be a danger to himself and to other people if he were to return home. So he was moved to the elderly mentally infirm unit while they decided where he was going to go next. He eventually had NHS continuing healthcare funding. But in that 3 months, he lost half of his body weight. He really struggled in hospital. The hospital was not the right environment for him, as it isn't for most people who are living with dementia. And he then moved into a nursing home where he spent over 8 years. In 2011, it was taken over by another provider, and the care dramatically declined. So over the months after that, my dad developed pressure ulcers, became very, very poorly, and eventually aspirated on his own vomit 5 times. He was taken to hospital. Doctors didn't really expect him to survive the night. They said it was a bit like pouring acid into your lungs. It was that bad. And they did their best to obviously support him and to help him with antibiotics, but he wasn't going to get better. And we had some very honest conversations about sort of end of life care. Very fortunate, we found another care home who were willing to take him, and they provided outstanding end of life care. So he moved in the day before his 85th birthday and died just under 2 weeks after that. I'm a big believer in documents like This Is Me. I think it does help staff to learn more about the person that they're caring for. If you complete it with the person when they're relatively newly diagnosed, they can still fully contribute to that conversation and the creation of that document. And it really talks about who the person is, what they respond best to, how best to support them, communication methods, their preferred sort of personal care, all of the things that make the person who they are. It's a very basic start, but it is a document that every person living with dementia should ideally have when they go into hospital, because it will provide staff with that crucial overview that will help them provide better care and support. So after Dad died, I began my blog, D for Dementia, really just to share some of our experiences, in particular the positive things that had worked for my dad. So music particularly had been really positive for him. And the blog was shortlisted for a big award in the autumn of 2012. I lost out to the BBC. Louis Theroux had made some dementia programmes. How dare he? But from there, things just kind of grew and grew, really. So in 2013, I won Best Independent Voice on Older People's Issues. I was involved in the planning and delivery of the G8 Dementia Summit, particularly looking at sort of from a carer's perspective, how carers feel overlooked and how you really don't identify yourself as a carer, which is a problem not just for the UK but for worldwide. People don't view themselves as carers. I just viewed myself as a daughter looking after a dad. and that's a very common sort of theme and issue that comes out for carers. And then work really kind of moved on, particularly around training and mentoring of health and care staff. So I've done GP training, and most notably now really working with social care providers. At the first conference I ever spoke about my dad's experiences of dementia, a chief executive of a care provider came up to me afterwards and he said to me, I need you to come and talk to my staff, tell them what you've just told us and help them to understand people who are living with dementia. From that, my dementia training was born, and that's really what I go and deliver now alongside sort of bespoke stuff for services that are looking for particular solutions or problem solving or enhancement of their staff's knowledge and understanding around particular issues. But it's all really focused around health, social care, ageing, and most notably dementia. I think if we got the training and education right for healthcare staff, then there's no doubt that dementia care would be a lot more person-centred, and it would move not just from being person-centred but to being relationship-centred. It would really be about the relationships the person with dementia needs to have with everyone who's involved in their care and support. I think it's got to move very much away from awareness, but I think certainly for the UK it's now about action. I think it's interesting that Dementia Awareness Week this year has become Dementia Action Week. The idea that now actually we need to be taking action for people with dementia, and for me that has to be improved training and education for health and care staff. It needs to be a much better link up between health and care services generally, because most people who are living with dementia do live with dementia for many years, and the need for social care services in some way or another, and indeed third sector services, is immense. So therefore there needs to be a better link up there between those services. There's got to be a lot more support for families, because so many families have got no idea where they're turning to. I mean, a classic example I saw on Twitter just this week, Wendy Mitchell, a very high profile lady who's living with dementia, has written a very highly acclaimed book, Somebody I Used to Know. She actually talks about how she's getting an absolute deluge of emails now from families and from people who are living with dementia who are desperate for some support and are asking for her advice. And while she's obviously delighted to offer that, you know, it highlights how we are not providing the post-diagnostic support that people need. It's very hard to make a difference when we have such very rigid structures and systems that healthcare professionals have to conform to. And it is a bit of a factory farming model of healthcare, I think. And whilst you may be able to process lots of people through a system like that and have good outcomes in cancer care, in heart care, it doesn't work for people with dementia. We need a different approach.